Can Donald Trump fire the Federal Reserve? President-elect Trump has made his disagreements with the Federal Reserve well known. But can he actually do anything about it when he gets back in office? Let's take a look. The Federal Reserve, as you may know, is the central bank of the United States, and it has a couple of different jobs. First and foremost, to provide stability to the entire financial system, to control monetary policy, to protect consumers. And it also has this dual mandate from Congress that you've probably heard me talk about. Basically, they are trying to maximize employment, which is just another way to say grow the economy, and stabilize prices, which is just another way to say controlling inflation. And although the Fed does a bunch of things sort of behind the scenes to achieve these goals, the main, most public thing that they do is influence interest rates across the economy through the federal funds rate. And this is where Trump has expressed displeasure with the Fed. He's repeatedly said that he thinks the Fed missed on inflation and they should have raised interest rates sooner rather than waiting until, spring of 2022. He thought they should have gone a couple of months early and started combating inflation. And honestly, I think if you asked people at the Fed, they would admit that they agree with that point, that they did wait too long to raise rates and inflation got worse than it would have if they had acted sooner. So fast forward today, Trump has again indicated that he doesn't like what the Fed is doing, and he wants them to be more aggressive in cutting interest rates to lower borrowing costs and stimulating the economy. Now, of course, the Fed was created by the government over 100 years ago, and it is authorized by Congress. But historically, the Fed has made decisions about monetary policy without approval from the federal government, whether it be the president or Congress. And I know this is confusing kind of because the names would say the Federal Reserve and the federal government, but they're actually not the same thing. Anyway, the point is that when the Fed wants to raise or lower their interest rate, they don't currently need approval from the president or from Congress. And this so-called Fed independence is somewhat controversial. Proponents of Fed independence say that monetary policy should be as apolitical as possible because there could be this incentive for the parties that are in power to manipulate policy to get reelected, even if it causes long-term financial damage. Meanwhile, opponents of Fed independence say that the Fed should be more closely coordinating with the actions of the executive branch, the president, or the legislative branches of Congress to be having a more cohesive, coordinated effort to controlling the American economy. Whatever side of this you happen to fall on, or maybe you are on neither side because you're just learning about this for the first time, the fact is that we have this hugely powerful financial institution that is made up of non-elected officials. The Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, as well as the rest of the Fed governors that he works with, are actually appointed by the president. And what's interesting about this story is that the current Fed chair, Jerome Powell, was appointed by President Trump back in 2018. And the terms are 4 years, so Joe Biden did reappoint him back in 2022. And that term doesn't actually end until May of 2026. So on paper, Trump is stuck with Powell for the first year or so of his second term. But given that Trump's been pretty vocally disagreeing with Jerome Powell, many people have speculated that Trump will ask Powell to step down so that he, Trump, can appoint a new chair, or maybe he would even go so far as to fire Powell. Now, Trump himself has said that he would like to have some more influence over Fed decisions, but Powell seems intent on maintaining the status quo and having the Fed continue making decisions at least somewhat independently. And actually, in the press conference after the Fed meeting, a reporter asked Jerome Powell if he would step aside if Trump asked him to do so, which he simply said no. And when asked if the president even has the power to dismiss a Fed chair, Powell said he didn't think so. It's important to be clear that Trump has not said that he would try to fire Powell, and he's not said that he'd ask Powell to step aside. In fact, the Fed has cut rates 2 times already this year, and perhaps Powell and Trump are more on the same page than they were a few years ago. Trump has campaigned on bolstering the economy, and that's something that could be assisted by cutting rates, which the Fed is already doing. But he's also said that he has a big priority on fighting inflation, and inflation could theoretically be reignited and heat up again if rates are cut too quickly. So perhaps the Fed's plan to reduce rates relatively slowly over the next year or so might actually be aligned with what Trump is trying to do. But that potential alignment hasn't stopped the speculation. We have media outlets, we have politicians, we have financial and economic advisors all weighing in on what they think Trump and Powell should do. For Powell's part, he stated clearly that he would mount a legal battle to oppose any attempts to fire him, which would be sort of this unprecedented legal battle in the US with a very uncertain outcome. So given that, my guess is that I think Trump will do what he can to work with Powell and influence Fed policy, but since the Fed is lowering rates and Powell's term ends in 2026 anyway, I think that Trump will probably wait out Powell to avoid a potentially volatile situation and a legal battle with an unclear outcome, and just appoint a chair that is aligned with his monetary policy preferences in 2026 if Powell isn't aligned with what Trump wants. Of course, we'll keep an eye on this once Trump is inaugurated in January, as this story has huge implications for the housing market and the economy as a whole, but until Trump gets back in office, we won't know exactly what he's thinking, and even then, it will probably take some months or maybe a year and a half until the end of Powell's term for this all to play out. Thank you all so much for watching. For BiggerPockets, I'm Dave Meyer.